day I wake up is another blessing. Thankful every second, getting God's protection. I lost connection in the desert, I had no reception. But in that time alone, I probably learned 1,000 lessons. I used my time for introspection and some self-reflection, and analyzed a couple ways to conquer my depression. Everything doesn't happen the way we plan it to, but if we harvest energy, then we can plan it too. So take a look in my eyes, that's where the story...
Alright, what's this one? Everything you need to know for Campfire Chat. So Campfire Chat is the Diablo 4 update video live streams that they do. So I guess he's just giving us the recap of what they talked about. Let's see what's going on.
We just watched the entirety of this dev live stream, or it's their Campfire Chat is what they call it. And this is basically their emergency session of discussing the latest patch that was very poorly received by the community. So I am going to break down all of the things they talked about. It's actually a significant list of things that they talked about, and I'm going to try to break this down as quickly as possible so that way you can save you as much time and you don't have to watch the whole thing. Now, there was a lot of like ho-humming about some questions. Those types of questions were like that were non-answers that sort of were skirts around, or they're like the very near future stuff. I'm just going to say soon TM, basically, instead of having to explain their thought process and everything about it. There was a lot of dodges. Okay, the ones that are very important, however, that the ones that are like they actually gave us either timelines or full answers or new stuff, I'm going to do first. So if that's what you care about, we're going to start with that first. Okay, with that being said, Nightmare Dungeons are the biggest change out of this whole thing. So the tier 100 that is currently is going to be moved down to a difficulty that is akin to tier 70 that we currently have. So if you are clearing tier 70 right now, once the changes, and this should be today, this is actually going to be a hot fix as of today, though if you're clearing 70s, you're basically going to be able to clear 100s, or that is so the way they have explained it. The reason for this is they think that 100s basically after the nerfs are very difficult to accomplish, and they want you to actually be able to do this content, and instead of having tier 100s be all of the in-game content in the game, they instead explain that they want to add new content into the game in the future, not now, but in the future, they're going to be adding new content to the game instead. That is stuff to do at the end game. They don't want tier 100s to basically be GG, the game is over. So that was the first, biggest, most important thing they mentioned. The second thing they mentioned, monster density, meaning how many monsters are actually in any given like circle area, the spawn of them, that is going to go up or they actually said substantially was their term, in both Nightmare Dungeons as well as Hell Tides. This will have two effects. It will increase the rate at which you're going to be getting basically cinders and hell tides as well as experience. And then obviously Nightmare Dungeons have really good experience in mobs. So increasing the density, therefore increases the experience gains. They did specifically mention there are a couple spots on the overworld that are already very dense and a couple dungeons that are already extremely dense. The most dense spots won't be increased to be even better, but all the other places are basically going to be increased in terms of density in order to make basically the game more fun. Now, another side point is Barbarian and Sorcerers will actually be classes now in the game. They have said that they are planning to deal with the fact that Sorcerer is basically dog shit, but they said it in other terms. Barbarian, same deal. They got nerfed into the ground, so they're going to try to deal with that as well. Both those classes are supposed to have this patch, and they said later on, about an hour later after mentioning it, that sometime, and they said production would get mad at them if they told them exactly when, but basically in a week or two, if you're a Barbarian or Sorcerer, you should be expecting
Okay, so they're fixing your character in a week
inventory
or two.
issues, they said they are aware that the new Malignant Hearts, etc., are filling up your inventory, etc., and that the Season 2 is still going to be when the gems now go as materials. So if you're expecting any sort of gems going into materials sooner, no, that's still Season 2, but they are adding an additional stash tab. They also mentioned trying to figure out ways to deal with the aspect, but that is a soon TM issue. However, elixirs will also stack to 99 stacks now. So you will actually have a little bit more available inventory in your sigil and elixir consumable inventory. So that's going to be a little bit easier there as well. That additional stash tab will be in patch 1.11. When that comes out, it will be a free addition to a stash tab. Now, moving on, they mentioned respecs. Respecs are going to be basically buffs for the player. It is going to be effectively approximately 40% cheaper. So you should expect
that's
that
nice.
your character, if you want to
'Cause I
have
do wanna
multiple
try
builds,
out
because they
that
said the point is you're
tornado
supposed to be able
build
to have
at
multiple
one point. I
builds
heard
and
that
go between
thing
them.
was
It
crazy.
should be 40% cheaper to be able to respec your character.
I wish
There
they
was
had,
no
like,
mention of quality of life in terms of actually clicking buttons to like respec all at the same time. Looks like they are still leaning on the Scroll of Amnesia, which is a seasonal mechanic, as far as my understanding goes, that will reset it once for free all at the same time. Someone did ask a question during the Q&A portion that's appropriate for this part of the conversation, which is armory and loadouts. They did mention a sort of
That's what I
soon
was just gonna
TM
say,
type of
loadout.
answer on that. They're thinking about it, etc. So we have no actual factual information on that one. Now, the next most interesting one is experience. They said they're actually buffing experience directly after nerfing it. So they're going to rebuff experience.
They
but
nerfed it?
specifically for levels 50 to 100. They effectively
That's why
want
it
you
feels
to
better
have the
that
1
I'm
to 50 to be
leveling.
like a mainlined experience
Like, I'm
of like
getting my
major game.
Paragon
And then
points
50
pretty
to 100,
well
they
right now.
specifically said it feels like a job and they do not want that. So they're trying to make people to be able to actually
feel better when I
acquire
was
level
leveling
100,
earlier
even
today.
if they didn't
I
use
was
the term
playing earlier
casual or
today,
anything. They
getting
kind of
them
can't use those terms as a
altars
PR
early.
thing. But basically, it sounds like they want the average player, whatever term they use, to be able to acquire level 100. This is something I myself sent directly as feedback if you've seen my previous rage ranting type of video. So I think that is appropriate to buff the late game experience, even though they did just sort of nerf experience anyway. Now, moving on to the questions. This would be more of the Q&A portion from the chat. They did directly poll questions directly from the Twitch chat, and we could see those questions were there. The leaderboards still coming season 3, but they are going to add specific content for the leaderboards. It sounds like they basically
don't
want
care about
some
leaderboards.
sort of new content to also be associated with the leaderboards to have things to push, basically
about
like a
leaderboard? I
Nightmare
don't care
Dungeon
about
2.0 or
leaderboard.
something. They didn't give any details at all. That's me speculating, but basically they want something that is a leaderboard equivalent in the future, season 3, soon.tm. Someone asked a really good question about Uber Unique, saying that the drop rates are basically garbage, and they said another soon.tm in terms of buffing it. They basically ho-hummed and said,
got
well, we
one
want it to be
unique
super
item.
rare. We don't want everyone to have them. We don't want people to build around them. It should be a pinnacle item or whatever. But basically, at the same time, they recognize the drop rates are basically garbage, and at some point, they're going to buff those. When that is, how much that is, no information. Crowd control was a question mentioned. They said it's a problem, and in the future, they're going to do something about it. Again, no additional information there. Armory, we've already talked about the loadouts. They mentioned the times of barb and source changes are a couple weeks. Loot filters and target farming. They mentioned they like this idea. It's another soon.tm type of answer. So
Loot
maybe,
filter?
possibly, future, maybe. Moving on to one that's kind of encouraging. They actually answered the question about matchmaking and group finders for things like dungeons. It's another soon.tm potential type of
Why?
answer. It's a maybe. Fixing skill issues. This is a definitely they're going to
It's
do
too
it. No
hard, I
timeline,
guess?
but they're doing it, which is fixing skill issue problems like you've
Oh,
seen
like
me
in
with the
Lost
corpse
Ark.
explosion death. They specifically called this one out. I'm sure they all had a laugh watching that one. And so they said they're going to try to fix some of these one-shot, in their terms, they use the word cheesy death mechanics. So they're going to be trying to fix some of that. They also mentioned that there was some
wonder
bugs
if
with
that's
things like
fixed already.
the guy that runs forward and the Tusker charge and stuff that would basically one-shot you. Some of those were actually bugs and have been nerfed several times already. Moving on here, they said the cast time on dungeons. Somebody actually asked a question being like, basically, why the hell did you make it from 3 to 5 seconds on dungeons? Doesn't really make a lot of sense. Now, does it? And they kind of dodged that answer, to be fair. They didn't really give much of an answer. They said that, well, we added the reset dungeon button, which has nothing to do with the question, but they dodged the answer. Moving on here, what do we have next? Resistances got asked about again. That is still season 2. No new information there. One question that was answered, which is kind of interesting, is somebody asked about campaign bosses like Astaroth, etc. These really interesting bosses that, for the campaign, seem quite good fights. They all sort of
Astaroth
smiled
was
and laughed
pretty
at the
cool.
same time when that question was brought up, and then said, we can't really talk about it. AKA, there's probably some kind of content in the future coming related to these type of things, maybe additional pinnacle bosses. It's another soon.tm. They mentioned the crashes, memory leaks, PS5 problems, etc., known issues, and there's
PS4
actively being
problems.
worked on currently. There was a crafting related question about what can we do with our gear once we have it or acquiring
bought it
new
on
gear. It seems
PC.
like
I don't
Gode's
know
the
why I
only thing we
didn't
can
buy
really
it.
do
I
with
know
it.
why I
And
bought
it seemed like
it,
they leaked a little bit of maybe
bought it on
craftings
PC.
coming in the future related to that. Now, Necro minions as well as Druid companions were asked about, asking like the viability of these type of things. They basically said there's room for improvement. And then as far as Druid companions go, they said they are exploring possibilities for that. Okay, don't know what that means, but that's how they answered that. Now, treasure goblins were the one they all seem to agree definitely has major room for improvement, and it sounds like they're going to add additional treasure goblins. Seems to be the breakdown of how they're.
I've killed like so many treasure goblins, and I haven't really got anything that good out of them. Like, can we put better loot in the treasure?
Going to fix that issue. So maybe a D3-esque type of thing, material goblin or something. No details, but it definitely seemed they are very positive in terms of adding that. Now, after all of these changes they mentioned, the other thing they did was send basically at the start of the stream and at the end of the stream, they did a phone competency wrap up of basically, hey, we kind of fucked up. I'm paraphrasing here.
Okay.
Basically, they said that more or less they fucked up by nerfing without adding something in exchange. They didn't really say that the nerfs were wrong for the game and that they're going to revert them. But what they did say is that the nerfs feel terrible and basically make the game unfun because while they took something away from all of you, they didn't offer anything at the same time. So they basically pledged to commit. They're going to do two things to fix this problem. Number one is going to be that the patch notes will be communicated before they come out to give time for the community feedback to sit on them in case they need to actually change anything before the patch comes out. This is basically if they released these patch notes earlier, people could have maybe like had a big pushback. Maybe they would have adjusted some of these numbers or something instead of retroactively having to go back and like revert stuff. Instead, they could see the patch note feedback before it actually comes out. One such example of this would be like the World Tier 3, World Tier 4 level requirements that then got hotfixed and removed out of once they saw the feedback of that was pretty negative. So basically, that's what they're planning to do in regards to that. Now, they also said one other thing is not only the communication, but they also said that what they want to do is add in basically buffs at the same time. So the only time that they're going to do these major nerfs, and they did say, what was the exact words they said? We hear you. We're never going to do this again. We will not remove the fun and power drastically ever again. And if we do major class changes, they're going to make alternatives as well. So to be honest, they seem very depressed when they came on the live stream. Seemed very bummed out. I can understand why. There was a lot of negative feedback around this patch. And basically their logic is we can't really do another one of these, is what it seemed like. And if we have to make changes, we're only going to make changes by removing like things like vulnerability, but then offering something else you can actually build. They said that one of the mistakes basically they realized they made is nerfing everything like vulnerability, crit damage, etc. But they're still like the main metas. You still have to build these. They didn't remove the pigeonhole. They just made the pigeonhole that everyone's still pigeonholed in literally worse. That was basically addressed and acknowledged. That is more or less everything in that patch or that campfire chat that is notable, that is worth mentioning. Everything else was sort of some soon.tms, no promises, and, you know, kind of explanations, further apologies, etc. That is all there is you really need to know.
Oh,
There's
thanks,
currently...
bro. Thanks a lot.
I'm hiding out, wilding out, cooling down, collecting thoughts till I find my route. And if they catch me, they'll be finding out what I'm about. Until then, I'm riding out. I'm hiding out, wilding out, cooling down, collecting thoughts till I find my route. And if they catch me, they'll be finding out what I'm about. Until then, I'm riding out, riding out. Check it out. I'm a desperado, I'm living it in real life. What's next to follow? I hit the bottle.